Everyone, welcome to another Overrated Film Saturday. I'm sorry this video is being uploaded late, but I've been relatively busy over the weekend, so expect sometime Saturday as well as Friday's video to be delayed sometimes. So, without further ado, let me discuss what I wanted to discuss for this Overrated Film Saturday, and that's Napoleon Dynamite. Yes, Napoleon Dynamite. This film's really interesting because it's awkward, and in the same time it's trying to be funny. And although I don't think this film is horrible by any stretch of the imagination, I still think it gets a little bit overpraised for what it ultimately ends up providing as far as a comedy is concerned. Um, does it bring up some interesting things? Yes, but I think its overall execution is kind of it's a little lackluster. I mean, it's not like um it's anything spectacular, but I don't think it's something that's um as horrible as maybe some of these other overrated films that I've discussed over the years. Or over the year or course of years that I've been making overrated film Saturdays. Um, I think um, that this stems largely from the fact that um, it's trying to be a film that's sort of just kind of. I feel like as a film, I know there is such a concept of meandering where a film doesn't largely have a huge giant focus, but it still kind of, you know, tries to reach in and kind of focus in on something from the start on, and then that carries the film towards the end, even if there's constant meandering in between. But the thing about Napoleon Dynamite is it's kind of just there. It's just about Napoleon Dynamite. It's not about anything really surrounding Napoleon Dynamite. It's just about Napoleon Dynamite and just kind of his life. Um, and although that sometimes can lend itself well, I think Napoleon as a character is kind of although we're supposed to kind of like him and root for him, there's a part of me that has this feeling of that he has this interesting aspect to his character where he kind of is he's awkward and strange, but at the same time he doesn't really display any sense of friendliness or he just kind of comes off as just very bizarre as well. And I know it's trying to offer that kind of awkwardness. And I think that awkwardness can lend itself to some fun. But I will say, largely basing the film on just Napoleon himself, I just think doesn't carry as much weight as it could have had it focused on maybe other things. I think it's interesting because I actually find the side characters actually a little bit more likable, a little bit more interesting. I would actually have liked to know more about them than really about Napoleon himself. Um, and I think that's really where the film, I think, maybe loses me personally, and I think where it kind of maybe loses a lot of people is the fact that there is this lack of focus, and again, focusing it on just Napoleon Dynamite doesn't carry it off all too well. Um, and and I think that's really where we see a lot of the problems. Just by the fact that it doesn't have this very coherent plot. The fact that it largely focuses on Napoleon, and there's just these kinds of awkward scenes that maybe don't add into anything that's kind of going on, or when they sort of go on, they're either kind of grotesque or they're not as funny as they maybe could have came off as. um I just feel like this film's kind of all over the place, and I think that's an issue, while at the same time it is kind of entertaining that it is a little bit all over the place. So I think this is why you get these two camps that really like and very and or either they like it a lot or they don't like it at all. And I've always been in the middle stance on this film. Like I understand why people got involved and got invested in this kind of a project, and I can understand why certain aspects of this film can be considered funny, but I can also understand the other side of where it just kind of feels like it doesn't know what it wants to be. It just kind of meanders all over the place, and largely focusing on Napoleon Dynamite doesn't really help it. So I honestly feel like this was an okay attempt, but the thing that I think made this film kind of uh, overly successful was it did launch John, I believe his name's Heater, if I'm not mistaken, career, because this was his really breakout role, and then eventually he did other projects within the realm of comedy. So, and eventually it didn't really pan out all too well, unfortunately. Um, but you know, this is an interesting film, but at the same time, I don't think it's anything that's worth really diving into and really analyzing, because it's just not that kind of a film to me. I think it just kind of is just a, yeah, we thought it was fun, so we made it, you know. We just decided to put this all together, and, you know, I mean, I think, you know, it doesn't really say too much, but then it doesn't really say too little, I guess. I just think it's just kind of random. It's just a random film that has some maybe genuinely funny moments mixed in with a lot of really awkward, strange, and unfunny moments maybe too. So I think it's really a blend of all of these different things. And I think as a result, that really doesn't make your film stand out all that much. Um, and you know, everybody talks about the dance scene and, you know, all of that, and how it's just so random, and you know, it tries to be goofy, but at the same time though, I feel like it's one of those projects where you know, it's a good attempt, but it's not as it's just not as much of a standout. It's good for what it ultimately is, and I understand the kind of audience it's trying to um, grasp, but I think ultimately when you look at it from a broader perspective, it really doesn't say all too much. It really doesn't try to go in depth into things. It's just kind of a standard awkward comedy with meandering. Um, so I think that's really ultimately why I think this film sort of struggles to really grasp something unique out of it. But I mean, I think that's really ultimately all I can say. It's just it's just not one of those films where you go, that was saying a whole lot, or but at the same time it's not completely, I guess you could say, forgettable. You know, you still remember it even if you don't like it, you know. So it's really a mix of in between, and I feel personally that it just gets kind of over pushed as this film that really did propel John Eater's career, um and you know, really put a spotlight onto I guess nerd comedy or such. But I think ultimately when you really look at it in the larger scheme of things, it's just kind of there. Napoleon Dynamite's just kind of there and not really saying all too much. So I think that's really ultimately all I can say about it. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.